Hi, I'm Beth with American Patchwork and Quilting, and welcome to our third tips video in our Blast from the Past Mystery Sampler. American Patchwork and Quilting is turning 30 in 2023, and we're counting down with this mystery sampler that has 30 blocks, one from each year of our history. So we've released 3 blocks this month, and they all use triangle construction, which means you have some bias edges. So when you have your bias edges, you have some parts that are a little stretchier than other sides. So this one side is not too stretchy, but this side you can see is really stretchy. And so when you're working with these, they do have a tendency to distort. So I have some tips for working with these bias edges today. Our first tip is to consider using starch on your fabric before cutting. So starch just helps stiffen your fabric a little bit and makes it easier to cut and sew. So you can just give it a little spray and then iron. So this also can really help get out those stubborn wrinkles too. And then you can go ahead and cut your fabric. Once your pieces are cut, you want to only move them as necessary. Because of those stretchy edges, if you're handling them a lot, they can easily distort. So a good way to do this is to get a small cutting mat, have your pieces there, and that way you can pick that up and bring it to your sewing machine to avoid handling those too much. Once you've sewn your pieces together and are ready to press, don't drag your iron across the pieces. You just want to set it down and press the piece. And then we recommend not using steam because using steam can further distort and stretch your pieces as well. This unit that uses a square and 2 triangles is used in both blocks 6 and 7, so I wanted to share some specific tips just for this unit. So I've got my square and triangles here, and first you're going to line up the 90-degree edges with one side here of the square, and then going to stitch down this side. And you will have those points that are going off the edge of the square, and that's okay. I've stitched my first triangle, now I'm going to add the second one. So we're adding it to the side that was perpendicular to our first seam, and we're doing the same thing. You're going to line up those 90-degree edges. And then on this one, I do like to flip it over so I can start from the square side, because if you're starting from the point, it's a little harder to get a smooth start when you start from the point. It could get sucked down into the machine. We only have one layer here. There's just not a lot for the machine to grip onto. And then there's a seam right here at the beginning as well. So you just don't get quite as smooth of a seam if you start on the point side. And then when you have these points, sometimes they do get kind of flipped over, so I do like to flip up my presser foot and just put it underneath. That way I can make sure my seam is continuing straight. For block 7, this is the completed unit, but for block 6 now we're going to add our second set of triangles. So on this one, we are lining up with this side, and it's going to be a little bit longer down here by the square. And then because now we have a couple of bias edges, this can get really stretchy. So it's a good idea to add a couple of pins, 1 or 2 pins, just depending on how much you're finding it's really stretching. And then we're going to stitch down this side. And unfortunately, we have to start on a point this time, so I always recommend using a leader strip to start. I've added my triangle and pressed it, and then we're going to add the second triangle on the other side. So now we're lining up with this point, and then stitching down that side. Here's the completed rectangle unit, and I always recommend trimming off these dog ears before you go and add it to the rest of the block. That will just help it go together a little nicer. I hope these tips will help you when you're sewing your bias triangles this month. And here are the 3 completed blocks. I'm absolutely loving this line. It's called Nantucket Summer by Camille Ross Kelly for Moda Fabrics. It's got just a gorgeous range of blues with a little pop of green. Once you've sewn your blocks, please share them with us. We have a private Facebook group, and you can also share on Instagram with the hashtag APQ Blast from the Past. Happy sewing!